No problem.
Oops. We only have 5.
Mhm.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So I will call us to order. Tonight is Wednesday, October the 9th. It's 5:35 PM. This is the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Advisory Committee meeting. We do not currently have a quorum. We do have some excused absences this evening. But we have 5 members present. 2 online and 3 in person. So I will, go ahead and defer any action items that require a quorum, including approval of minutes. And we'll go into the topics of the meeting and our agenda. And folks can certainly watch the recording or catch up with a fellow neighbor DAC member to catch up. So skipping item 2, and we'll go to the discussion agenda. And our first is item A, which is our naming policy presentation. Inviting Melina to come forward. Thank you.
Hi.
Yay.
Yay.
Our quorum.
Trying to get to quorum.
But you are it.
So is Mark coming?
He's
He's on there.
online.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Thank you.
Share my screen. So, my name is Melina Francisco. I manage the marketing and communications at NCPRD. Thank you for having me today. I'm here to just share an update on our naming policy. Over the last handful of months, we've made some upgrades to it, just to make it a more transparent and inclusive process. And so I'm going to be sharing some of those highlights today, but the full policy is in your packet to refer to as well. So let's get started. So what does the naming policy do? So NCPRD's naming policy establishes a systematic and consistent approach for the naming of major assets, including parks, natural areas, trails, and facilities. It does not include smaller amenities, rooms within a building, benches, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that we see more as sponsorship. Policy. So why do we need an updated policy? So the current NCPRD policy was last approved in 2006. So 18 years later, we're finding that the information is just really outdated. It's not in alignment with our operational or engagement best practices. We also have some really exciting projects coming up, like the new park and community center at the Concord property that will need a name. And it's time sensitive because we can't have the signs go into production until we select these names. And so this new naming policy will address some of the issues, and that includes, greater detail of restrictions and what applies, clear and defined naming categories, which didn't exist in the older policy, recognition and involvement of Indigenous communities, which also was not included in the last policy, and then a step-by-step naming process, which we put a lot of thought into, led by NCPRD staff. So there are some exceptions, and we wanted to call them out here. So that includes previously named parks transferred from another agency to NCPRD, future park sites where a name has been specified as a component of purchase and sale agreement, of course, with the support of the DAC and approved by the board of directors, park facilities where naming rights are conveyed to an individual or business in return for financial support to NCPRD, again, with a contractual agreement supported by the DAC and approved by the board of directors. And then facilities that NCPRD operates but does not own. And in those cases, the owners of the facilities would retain authority for their future renaming. And we also have kind of buffers in place too, to ensure that names are in alignment with our mission and our vision and our values as well. So there's ways to make sure that all the names are appropriate. So what are those categories? So the categories include geographic and special features, so place-based names or special features, which can help improve the ease of local district amenities and help establish a sense of place. Historic names, so references to the past can educate the community about historical context and preserve memories of groups, elements, symbols, or events connected to the place-based history within the district. Native flora and fauna, so naming parks after native plants or animals illustrates the value the community places upon the natural environment. And then outstanding individuals and community organizations. So, this acknowledges the sustained contribution made by individuals and outstanding civic groups or non-profit organizations. And then businesses. So a business may have a park, facility, or trail named after it for a defined period of time. And this would be something established in the naming rights sponsorship agreement. So these are the categories. Again, this sort of information didn't exist in the past naming policy in the current one. And so it just provides a little more guidance. And then we have the naming process for more clarity in terms of what it looks like, what the process actually looks like. So step one includes public notification. So NCPRD will submit a public notification and then promote the naming opportunity with the community and local organizations. And then there's 30 days that the public can submit the names. And after it closes, then, we gather those names and staff will review them and make sure they're in alignment with the policy that's in place. And then from there, there's a committee that reviews the recommendation, that reviews all the, names and then provides a recommendation. And so this is in the packet, so you can look for more information there, but that committee may include the NCPRD director or designee, the deputy director or designee, DAC representative, tribal government and or community representative, and then identified community planning organization representative if it's appropriate for this project, and then neighborhood association representative as well. It's not limited to just these, but that gives you an idea of the makeup of the committee. And then the recommendation, so there must be a 2/3 majority vote. Once that recommendation is in place, then it goes to the board for approval to accept or decline the name. And then once a decision has been made, NCPRD will be responsible for communicating the name to the applicants, to the DAC, and the community within 2 weeks. There's also the option for appeals also as well after the name has been decided. So that's the process. Next steps is, we'll be taking this to the board. We would love the support from the DAC. Does anyone have questions?
Go ahead, your hand was up first.
Okay, I didn't put my right thing. You mentioned CPOs and you mentioned 30 days. So not all CPOs that are affected meet every month. So that would be an issue to take into account because it says minimum of 30 days. It doesn't say maximum of 30 days.
A minimum of 30 days.
Right, so it could be longer.
It could be longer.
To make sure to include an affected community. That's all I was speaking of.
Could you go back to the slide with the categories?
Of course.
So I was excited to see you guys do this because we've been talking about this in Milwaukee and we haven't kicked off having this conversation, but about a year ago, I did a bunch of research and naming policies of different parks. Parks managers around the country. So it sounds like there are more details about each of these categories. Okay, I obviously didn't read far enough in my packet. So I'll own that, but I will just say that the research I did, when it comes to individuals, naming policies for individuals, there's a lot of people want to do that. I mean, they want to honor somebody who's active in their community and they want to do that. And then in Milwaukee, we have Ball Michelle Park, named after 2 of the guys who helped raise the money to build the park. But that name doesn't really mean anything to anyone now, 20 years later. So I do want to sound a cautionary note about naming parks after people. And I will also say that, most of the policies I looked at, I mean, some policies just outright disfavored that. They didn't like disallow it, but they disfavored that. And some places had a policy of you can't do it until the person's been dead for 3 years. So not doing it after live people and stuff, and like kind of letting some time for the community to sit without putting a name on that. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there. And then I wanted to ask, is Concord the only thing that NCPRD needs to name at this point? Because I remember it was before my time on the DAC, but I know there was a lot of conversation about Boardman wetlands and what it was going to be called.
So, we actually, we went through this process with, Board Wetlands Nature Park, so that's already happened. The other
Okay.
project I believe that we'll also eventually need a name for is the new park at the Jennings campus as well, and those are the main ones.
Thank you.
Mark has their hand up.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I just wanted to be in some transparency that Jeanette and I had a chance to discuss this new naming policy with Dominic and Milena earlier this week. And that in addition to the presentation that we've just seen, there was also some important supporting documents that were provided to us. And that kind of describes some of the other elements of the naming process, including how the committees are put together, what the appeal process is, and other details that might be of interest. So I think I would maybe suggest, if it would be all right, if those documents be provided to DAC members in the event that they would like to see more details about the specifics of the naming program. And so I think the questions I had were answered in relation to the appeal process and how the naming or how the committees are put together. And I did want to make a motion in support of this, and I'll read that to you if that's all right, and we can go from there. And my motion is that I move that the District Advisory Committee concurs with the proposed naming policy and supporting documents as presented and recommend approval and adoption by the NCPRD Board of Directors. Thanks.
Great idea. I have a concern. We don't have those, and I would also like to see the rest of the stuff. So
Favor to me, if you could raise up your flag, I'll be happy to call on you.
Sure.
So there's a motion on the floor currently.
And if I could just point out too, that the documents provided to chair and vice chair, it was the actual naming policy and then this presentation.
And that naming policy is in our packet.
It should be good.
So, okay, so this is potentially an administrative oversight, which I will have to own part of. I'm not sure how that happened, but there should actually be a policy and procedures that was included in your packet. So I don't know how Chair DeCastro wants to handle this tonight. However, I would like to, we will definitely share those documents with you. And I think it will address some of the questions that have been brought up this evening. So I apologize if that's the case. You could potentially, if you felt like you generally wanted to support this, you could still move forward with your motion. Again, I will defer to Chair DeCastro, but I'm happy to provide these materials. And if you wanted to pick this up again at the next meeting, you could do that as well. But we will absolutely provide these materials to you. Sorry for that oversight.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Director Savas, please.
I'm just wondering for expedience sake, perhaps we can you pull the policy up and display it on the screen? That way you can maybe
And Jessica,
add to it or not. Or you can take your time, whichever way you all want to do it.
we'll get it pulled up.
I think that's a great idea.
Dominic, do you want to pull it up or do you want me to?
Do you have it accessible?
Since you're sharing
You have
already.
a hard copy right in front of you? I do have a hard copy, but if you want to pull it up, I can also make some copies.
We should, would you like me to pull it up on my computer or?
Yeah, and we can, we can pick this up next time too, but I can pull it up right now also. Yeah.
So from a parliamentary perspective, there's a motion on the floor to adopt the resolution put forward by Mark. I also see two hands. I'd like to call on whomever raised their hand first. Can you let me know if it was Ally or Mark?
That's Ally was first.
I
Okay.
wasn't sure. So I also just want to echo, I think, did you guys hear me? I don't know if my internet just cut out, but I also want to just echo concerns about the process. I'd like to learn more about the process when it comes to outstanding people or outstanding citizens, just because we want to be mindful of all of the impacts that they've had on all people. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about that before I support this motion.
So for parliamentary procedure, the motion dies for lack of second, but he can raise it again.
I think you heard that, Mark, right?
Yes, I did. And I did want to mention that one of the reasons why this is being brought forward is that there is a time frame necessary for signage for the new Concord site that needs to be taken into consideration. So it is not just something that we can sit on for a while. It is important to have this taken care of before soon.
Thank you, Mark. So to
Yes.
I would normally want to motivate the motion. I find it to be both flexible and it addressed the questions that I personally had. To bring you up to speed, Mr. We're looking at the policy, the naming policy presentation. And there was intention that the policy itself would be included in our packet. And unfortunately, that was not included. It was probably a human oversight. I apologize that folks weren't able to put eyes on it. As Mark mentioned, it is time sensitive. Because there will be naming coming up and this needs to be approved by the board of directors before it goes into effect. And with that, I see that it's up on the screen, so I will hand the floor back to Melina.
Yes, and I just wanted to address Ally's question. So regardless of the category, the process is the same for how the name is chosen. So that step-by-step process will always be the same. There's always going to be 30 days. You know, it's in terms of like all the names being submitted and then having our staff gather those names, review them, making sure they comply with the policy, and then having the committee review them. Now, in terms of outstanding individuals and thank you, and community organizations, the way we currently have it is this naming approach requires compliance with the following criteria. So when 50% or more of the value of the parkland is donated, when 50% or more of the value of the development costs are donated, and then when an individual, family, community organization has made a significant or sustained contribution to the community and or NCPRD over the course of many years. Is currently the breakout for how that would be applicable. And Kia, I would love for you to weigh in, but it might make sense for everyone to have a little more time to review it, but
So we're not going to the board until December.
Yeah.
So there is
Oh,
time to-
so we could come
so
back
we
next
could
month.
come back next
Very good.
month
Yeah.
if the DAC agenda permits. Happy to do that so that you all have more time. While we have Melina here tonight, if you have any more questions, please feel welcome to ask them now.
I guess just on that last bit of language you were reading about a person or a group that had made sustained contributions. As we have all seen over the last well, especially since the pandemic, but even way before that, we've learned a lot about people who maybe did make some contribution, they got something named for them and, but also had other things in their past. So is there any sort of background check or any sort of historical check that's going to be done on that?
Yeah, so any name would have to be fully vetted, and then there's also language in here that basically says if we discover now or later in the future, if information comes up and it no longer aligns with our values, that we happy to change the name. So that is, there are buffers in here that prevent that.
Ally?
So just to confirm what I just heard, so there is some sort of way that you have to vet the person and vet the history and it's just not being shown on the screen. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that would be a part of the process for preparation of submissions and collecting. That's something that our staff would review after we collect the names, and that would be discussed within the committee when reviewing names and providing that recommendation.
Thank you.
Is your hand up again, Ally? No problem. I just want to make, don't, please flag me if I miss something. Thank you.
If there's no further questions, if everybody wants a chance to review, and maybe this could be a discussion item in next. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melina. Go ahead, please.
Can we, while Melina's here, can we get an update on the website, or is that something you're planning to discuss later?
It's the welcome.
Okay.
Oh, sure. The website, we've completed our user testing, and so we have heard from everybody involved regarding the creative concept and the navigation. And so we're in the process of developing the wireframes currently and reviewing those. And then we'll dive into content creation as well. And so we appreciate everyone's feedback and getting a chance to weigh in, but it's moving along nicely.
So do you have a time for when you expect to launch it?
Yeah, our goal is January.
Okay. I guess I'll make a comment that I belatedly tried to use the links today, and I noticed it was after the date when you wanted the input, but I'm gonna give you my input anyway, which is, I think the website's pretty good. The content of it is pretty good. My one frustration over the years has been events. And that events are kind of lumped in with programming, and they're the fun events, the programming type events, the Fiesta Latina and the, teen nights and all that. And if you want to find a volunteer event, you have to go somewhere else. They're not together. You have to go, if you want to find a, parked work party kind of event, you have to go somewhere else. And I don't think, it took me a while to find it. I think a lot of people wouldn't know how to find it. So I would suggest a calendar that has all events, like these meetings, the board's meetings, and all of the events in one place.
Yeah, no, thank you for the feedback. Yeah, we do have the board meetings currently under the events page and select natural area events, but that's the plan, is to have an events section that is really easy to find. It has all of the events in one place. That is just really front and center. It would have a spot on the homepage, so it's easy, to click through. So that is definitely a consideration. But thank you for the feedback.
So just review, Melina, the calendar will be the catch-all, so if someone goes on the calendar, they will see everything.
They'll see at all NCPRD events.
Okay.
One place.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mark, thank you for your resolution, and please hold on to that language. And that will transition us under our discussion agenda to the 5-year financial forecast. Dr. Selly.
Here. Speaking to all of you, well, Right, thank you, Chair DeCastro. Good evening. I think everybody knows me, but just for the record, my name is Kia Sally. I'm the Director of NCPRD. In March, the DAC was briefed on a 5-year financial forecast for the district. The financial forecast message this evening is consistent with the message delivered earlier this year. Revenues are not able to keep up with the rising costs of doing business, largely due to a static tax base and minimal to no fee increases for services and programs. The static tax base that I'm referring to is the fixed permanent tax rate of 54 cents per 1,000 of assessed value that was approved by the voters in 1990. This fiscal year, the tax rate is projected to generate approximately 7.3 million to cover services, programs, parks and building operations such as utilities, maintenance, minor repairs, planning projects, and to a lesser degree, capital projects such as new parks. Despite these fixed and outdated revenue streams, the cost of doing business has significantly increased, as I think we all know with our family budgets. These rising costs include wages, including even minimum wage, utilities, natural gas, electricity and water, and vendor costs for services, maintenance, and repairs. NCPRD uses approximately 800,000 to 1.5 million each year of fund balance. Essentially, we're dipping into our savings each year to cover the cost of operations. So this is not a financial management issue, but a revenue issue. There is a third source of funds that NCPRD collects from new construction called System Development Charge Funds. But these funds are only eligible for use on capital projects that increase the capacity of the district to serve new residents and new employees. So these funds can be used to develop a new park or a major new amenity, such as a pickleball court at an existing park, if that new amenity increases the capacity of the park to serve additional residents and employees. These funds can't be used for capital repairs and replacement, such as replacing the roof here at the aquatic park or replacing a mower, and they cannot be used for district operations. So to stretch our limited tax dollars and service and program fees, you'll see tonight in your packets that this third source of revenue, System Development Charge Funds, has been increased for the Concord property projects, the park, playground, and community center renovations in place of some of those limited general fund revenues. So this is a change from the financial forecast that you saw in the spring, which included less SDC funds, and SDC funds, I would note too, only from zone 2 where the project is located. Remember, we have 3 zones for our system development charge funds. So in the spring, again, you saw that the Concord property project was only funded by zone 2, not these 2 other zones. But now, in this financial forecast, funds from the 2 other SDC zones were allocated consistent with policy adopted last year in 2023, which included the Concord property projects as a district-wide resource. So by making this change in this forecast to, again, allocate system development charge funds from those 2 other zones, the district remains solvent for an additional year to fiscal year 2031-32. So for 6 years beyond this current fiscal year. You'll also see in this forecast in your packets, that the capital repair and replacement program funding has also been updated to include revenue from the sale of the Wichita property, which just closed. And I also want to note that we are developing a kind of a fund within that program that where we can put land sale proceeds, such as the Wichita sale, for property and secure them for property acquisitions for the future. So essentially, when we sell a piece of property, we secure those resources to buy another piece of property. So we're working on that right now. You'll see that, we hope, in the next fiscal year budget. The forecast for expenditures, though, I want to note on capital improvement projects has not been updated beyond the current budgeted capital projects. We are really going to look to the system plan to inform those future investments, as we've discussed. We'll continue to update this five-year financial forecast and provide regular briefings to you, and we will use this forecast as a tool for developing our next fiscal year budget. I'm happy to take any questions on this, and I also want to note that I'll update all of you on the supplemental budget changes that were approved by the board in September as part of my director's report.
Go ahead, please go.
Thank you for that, and I'm thrilled with the increase of numbers. And I want more, because I look at these as being broad categories as opposed to having significant subcategories or components that I would. Maybe there'll be the summary, and then there's a place that wants to see more detail, but I'm very much interested in having more of a clarity on which projects sort of in the budget. But the budget is already changed, and so to keep track of where the money, the big chunks of money is going. And then I had another question. I understood from, and I maybe not kind of fit it in, but so that was a request. And my question is,
Could you clarify your request?
that we have a more expanded detail as to, well, so we have the taxes and then sorry, capital outlay. It just, those were big numbers and they're only totaled.
So, so this forecast, when you look at the numbers for the current fiscal year, the detail is in our current fiscal year budget. So that big budget document breaks down all of these major funds into a lot of different categories. So I'm happy to walk through that with you.
Okay,
But when we talk about, the existing capital projects, again, it's all of those capital projects that we detail in our current fiscal year budget book
correct.
that are active. Any future capital projects will be determined by the system plan project.
Thank you. The other question I had is I was listening to one of the board of directors meetings, and there was a discussion about a breakout of how much maintenance costs goes to various parks by one of the commissioners, and I'd like to know where we could get the data that supported that comment, because it's and I can tell you what specifically, if you don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't know the meeting that you're talking about, so let's talk offline, so that I can understand, the source of that comment. We don't typically track the maintenance activities per individual park. We know what we're spending on operations and maintenance in total, but we don't, we don't have, meters that tell us how much time staff spends in each individual park. So I'm not sure, maybe hearing the question or hearing the comment from the board member would help inform me as to
It was the
how I can
meeting
generate
that
the money.
approved the, not the discussion of, but you approved the supplemental budget. It was in that session,
Okay, I'll
and
rewatch that.
yeah,
Okay,
and there was a discussion about how maintenance fees were distributed. And I actually, I appreciate what you just said that you don't currently do, but to know some more distinction as to where the maintenance, since it's the biggest, I think it's the biggest item. I changed bags and the budget didn't make it into this bag. So, but I do believe there's a lack of, so the biggest expenditure, I do believe, for NCPRD is in fact maintenance, correct?
operations and maintenance are a significant part of our budget for sure. I wonder, and Director saw this, perhaps you remember the comment, but I wonder if that comment was really talking when we look at where the parks are located in the district, those parts of the district where we have more parks, we're generally spending more money conducting our operations and maintenance. So more resources are going to that part of the district.
Right.
That probably was the source of the comment.
Yeah, I wasn't at that meeting. I was with the state legislature
Correct.
touring Clackamas County that day, so I couldn't attend that meeting, but you were there.
I was there, I just
Right.
don't remember that comment exactly, so I'll watch the video and.
And you just read
get
the last
information
bullet
for you.
there, and then I'd like that.
Oh, sure.
Commissioner West.
Okay, so the comment was that, Vice Chair West stated that NCPRD has areas that are park deserts. Park deficient is how we've talked about that, and that NCPRD provides Milwaukee with a $500,000 annual subsidy for park maintenance in the city. So I think that's probably calculated both based on the allocation of resources to the Milwaukee Community Center as well as operations and maintenance of those parks. So it probably had more to do with the community center.
But in
I'll get you
case,
that information
yeah, I'd like to
specifically.
be able to see the source data
Sure.
that generates that. Because that is something that a number of us on subcommittees, et cetera, have been looking for, and I appreciate. It isn't how many minutes here or there, but it is important to get a sense of, particularly with all the uncertainties about the future, it is to know how much. So if a party was to depart, they would have to absorb that extra cost, and they have to take that into account, and then those who had other thoughts about it would have to know that if there already is a subsidy going on.
Okay, I'll call on Ms. Murray next.
I think there's rebuttals, CK.
No, it's not a rebuttal at all. Go ahead, Mr.
No, we'll go to the next question, please. Missouri, and then Ally, and then Mark, and then Lisa.
So just to clarify, the difference between the adopted and projected budget, that's just SDC money moving around, did I miss that?
So are you talking, so what I was just talking about is the financial forecast. And I was just calling out the changes between what you saw last spring in the financial forecast and what you're seeing tonight,
Got it,
essentially.
okay.
So I'm not proposing a new budget or anything like that. But you are correct in that, one of the major differences is the allocation of additional system development charge resources to the Concord property projects. And that has freed up some general fund resources.
Okay. So as you mentioned in 2031 and 2032. There's no money left, right? There's 1.2 in the general fund, but 1.5 is being pulled at the deficit. So we're running out of money, I guess. So I'm trying to find a way to, I say this every meeting, like, what do we do? Like, what's our plan?
So,
Yeah, and then another question after that, that was kind of related to Grover's.
So what's our plan is a big topic of discussion. The first is essentially, this is the first time was in the spring was when we had a 5-year financial forecast. And I have to thank Director Savas and interim Director Cindy Becker for really putting that together for the district. Because that tells us kind of what our runway is for solving our problem, which is trying to balance tax revenues and with the needs, if you will, of the district. And so hence begins the conversation about what those solutions are. A couple of the obvious solutions on the table might be an increase in the tax rate. How much that tax rate increases, we need to think carefully about. And that is directly related to how much we want to grow in a certain period of time. Because you need a certain amount of resources, general fund resources, to operate and maintain new assets, right? And then when you look at the capital side of the equation, we need to think about the obvious menu option on the table, in addition to the typical grants and other types of external funding resources, might be a capital bond measure. An interim solution might be a levy for operations. That would be a short-term fix. That would be a permanent tax rate increase. So there are these different there's this whole range or menu of funding options for both operations and capital. We're going to get to that part in the system plan soon. So the system plan is going to help us, again, flesh out this full menu. And then we're going to be able to talk about what are some of those levers or those options on the menu that we might want to take action on. And that's a great conversation to hear as well as with the board.
And I guess we're running out of time because these are projections, right? We see how things are, that's 5 years, but that could be in 2 years. So I guess the sense of urgency not saying this is what I'm feeling, but the sense of urgency to me is clear. I guess my term runs out in a few years and I have no voting power, but if this is a business, I'd be looking for another job, is what I'm saying, like in the private sector. Then to follow up Grover's question, is there a way to get a heat map of seeing where the tax rate is concentrated? So like this area is pulling in 2 million of the, I think you said 7 million in taxes. Is there a way to kind of see where that's distributed? To piggyback with Grover's comment, if Milwaukee happens to leave, to see how much they get yearly versus the rest of the district? Or is that data being pulled for us to understand, or the budget committee to understand?
So I'm not aware that we have that kind of data. I think that's actually a really interesting data set. So I'll look into whether or not we've ever generated that, or if it can be easily generated by the assessor. I think that's really interesting. But to your earlier comment about the sense of urgency, there's definitely a sense of urgency. I do want to assure you that as part of the thoughtful budget process that we go through each year, we build in average inflationary measures. Now, the past couple of years have been very unusual in terms of the amount of inflation that we've all experienced. But we're going to assume more normal inflationary trends, but we do have inflation that is represented in our budget. We also have the increasing costs of operating and maintaining new assets like the Concord property project. So we've built some of those things into our budget. But having said that, I definitely have a sense of urgency. I know the board feels a sense of urgency, and that's why the board has supported this idea of a financial forecast for quite some time. So again, the financial forecast is the most basic building block to figuring out what our runway is, and then we can have a discussion about solutions within that time frame. Does that make sense? So we have a plan. I want to assure you we have a plan. Now, if we experience inflation similar to what we've experienced the past couple of years, if we experience that a year or 2 or 3 out, then that runway shortens, and then we will have to change our budget. We'll have to change what kind of services and programs we offer, and we'll have to change our plan in terms of capital improvements. So we'll have to pivot with those different kinds of variables.
Okay, and Mayor, if your team, your staff gets that data for the city, that would be great if you could share that if possible.
I've never seen it, but
Okay.
I will definitely share it.
All right. Awesome.
Okay, thank you. We'll call on Ally next.
Yes, I just want to first echo my 2 concerns were exactly what Musiri and Grover brought up. The sense of urgency is there. We have had these presentations in the past, and yet, I know that this systems plans we're doing is going to provide us a lot of information for us to then make a better informed decisions. But we know this has been kind of come in. And so I am curious as well as to what discussions have there been? What are some realistic plans to address this financial future that we are facing? And then the second thing is I'd like to just echo what Grover said. I believe it was at the last board of directors meeting. Director Savas said that our resources were going to Milwaukee, and that's a fact. But I'm hearing that we don't actually know exactly how much money is going where. That's the funding that's going towards Milwaukee is lumped in with the community center. So I'm also curious as to where the information is coming from, especially if there's such a certain statement made in a public meeting. So thank you.
Calling on Mark next.
Thank you. I not don't have a question. I guess I have an observation. So I'm going to ask you guys to bear with me while I think out loud here a little bit. When I look at the projection, I think what comes to mind for me is that it shows a very static district. It shows that things are not going to change much, that there isn't growth, that things are going to stay pretty static. And I mentioned that because I recently heard an interview with Pete Buttigieg by Ezra Klein from the New York Times, where he was asked to discuss his thoughts on the lack of confidence in government. And Pete Buttigieg made a very good observation that I think applies, to us as a district. And that is that there is often a feedback loop that kind of feeds this lack of confidence in government. And he described it as though, that sometimes, with government entities, just like this district, rely on money in order to operate. And when those monies are cut back, either intentionally or because of lack of sufficient funds, then there is a lack of confidence by the public that the department is not providing the services that they expect. And so because they don't provide those services, they are not inclined to provide additional monies to make that department work better. And so it becomes this like continuous feedback loop that continues to erode at the confidence in the department or in the government entity. And so I think that's something I'm concerned about for our district, is that as we see our resources decline, that's going to mean a change in the level of service that we provide to the district, people within the district. And how is that going to affect our ability to go out to the public and ask for additional resources to have the department function the way in which our constituents expect. And so I think we have a very difficult job ahead of us. And I think the systems plan is going to help. That's only one little piece of it. And so I really look forward to this DAC being a part of that process and trying to figure out ways in which we can continue to provide the level of service that our constituents want, and also to show that we are good stewards of the money that they have given to us, and that we have a way of showing them that we can perform, especially, particularly if we ask them for additional funding. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Calling on Director Savas.
Yeah, thank you. So great conversation. Really glad we're here talking about this. I feel like finally, let's talk about the finances. I mean, Siri, you and I are on the same wavelength here, so I appreciate, thank you for bringing this up. With regard, just finish one thing here, the comment that Commissioner West made is slightly inaccurate. I think Kia's explanation about that subsidy aspect is in the totality of parks and the community center, and they got those numbers. So, I think the way Kia's captured that is correct and stated it. So I'll just leave that there. Way back in 2019, I think 2018, we sat down at the Concord building and we tried to get that question asked with the administrator at the time, the district administrator, Mr. Schmidt. The question asked about parks maintenance. Can we get a breakdown of what that cost is? And I think he made that attempt, and the acting director of NCPRD at the time did not really, in my opinion, God bless him, but didn't really get there. And I think Kia's assessment of tracking the time is correct, but in a business would typically track that time, right? You have to. I mean, it's just, don't know where to stay alive for a business. So I think I thought then, I think it now, I think it's a doable thing to at least, however it's done, similar to a landscaping company or anyone else. They track their time. They're going to give a bid to provide a year of service in a particular property, and it's not going to be the same bid for another property, right? You'll just lump them all in together and give everyone the same bid. So past conversations, and thanks, Kia, you're right. We did finally get Cindy Becker, when she was the acting director, to do this 5-year forecast and actually show us the budget and what it really looks like. Because all these years we have struggled with communications and trying to get the numbers. And the budget committee for NCPRD meets that one day for that 15 to 45 minutes, if that, and does not really roll up their sleeves and does the hard work that really ought to be done. And the prior committee, back when it was called the DAB, because of COVID and everything else that happened, that, you know, they got a budget report at almost every meeting, but it didn't get into the details. Like we ought to, and I was never clear. Unfortunately, it's been a struggle for me to get good, clean fiscal answers to all the things, to understand the health of the district. Now we turn the corner, we have that, and, you know, by virtue of the good work that Cindy's done and the good work that Kia's done, we're gonna approach this a little bit differently. I would encourage you all not to use the word we want to budget, because that has a whole legal meaning and a process, but you can talk about the finances and the financial health and have this conversation anytime, any day you wish, right? Just as long as you don't categorize it in the budget. So as I was asked to speak about the fiscal health of the budget at the Oak Grove Community Council group here, and I said I was asked, all of our budgets are, you know, we're fiscally above water, structurally sound, with the exception of one. And that is this district. This is the only district that's underwater and going underwater. So now that we can see what it is and we get more detail, I think you have the opportunity, all of you have the opportunity to say, how do we, putting aside capital, putting aside SDCs, but it's the operation and maintenance, how do you responsibly either add to your revenue, which is a ballot measure, or how we got here, maybe we wouldn't have done or added, whatever it may have been. I don't know how, because again, that's the vague piece here. I think we have a responsibility at least to look forward and try to solve it as opposed to look backward. Someone wants to look backward, that's okay too. But I'm not comfortable with going underwater. And I'm not gonna sit by and just say, yeah, we're just gonna completely tanking 800 to $1.5 million a year and do nothing about it. I'm worried that, you know, if we don't start all singing from the same sheet of music, and put on a public display of cooperation, I'm not sure our voters today in the particular climate we have at this moment are gonna say, yeah, I have a lot of confidence. Things are going along just dandy. You know, they're not right now. I mean, as far as what's out there, a lot of misinformation stirring about, it's not doing us any good at all. Right. So now, you know, here 2-3 months later, after all of this stuff stirring about, I'm concerned from hearing from constituents that, you know, why should we support anything? I don't have any confidence. So I think it's incumbent upon us to fix it. And if we don't fix it, why would I, not only would I, you know, be concerned about my job, right? Or leave this company as your example was, Missouri, but why would I vote to continue on, right? And I don't know the numbers, as far as what it would take from a tax base, a millage rate to make us get above water, but that's not the only part of the equation. The other equation is you cut. You can cut services or programs. That's not pleasant. That's not going to be a good, easy conversation, but it's the responsible thing for you all to consider and talk about. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. So I'm up next. I will add that, as a district, we're a public entity, we have to submit a balanced budget. A private company can be over leveraged and you might never know. And I do think there's a transparency here that the forecast really highlights, so we know where we are. That question that's posed of what will we do? We either increase revenue, decrease costs, or some of both, which leads to my question. NCPRD, I think, has been a great team player for a very long time. And right now, you know, if you go back to the 2018 land swap, there's a great high school that North Clackamas School District has, Nelson High School, et cetera, et cetera. At least that's a positive that came out of all of that kerfluffle when Happy Valley left the district. But all that to say, you know, with the county looking at buying the Clackamas School for the recovery center, there's this tension of NCPRD could use the highest asking price that's reasonable. And from the county's perspective, their budget is pretty tight too. They would like to have the lowest purchase price that's reasonable. How does that tension get resolved? We may not have the answer for that tonight, but I think that if we're selling property, it's kind of I grew up working class, you know, if you didn't have enough money, you know, were you gonna, go to one of those payday loans? Were you gonna sell plasma? Were you gonna sell your stuff, go to the pawn shop, etc.? We wanna do this, we wanna think about revenue sources in a way that, that makes sense, you know, not 20% interest on a payday loan or something. I'll stop there. Calling it on to next.
Yeah, I really appreciate, the idea that I think you proposed and we spoke of tonight about if you sell something like Clackamas School, that it goes into a special category fund for buying more property. I think that's a great thing. And, just to go back to what Commissioner West said about subsidizing Milwaukee. I'm also looking at the material that you shared with us before, where you say disproportionately, more district taxes go into Milwaukee than we receive. The public is not aware that the district is subsidizing NCPRD activities in the city of Milwaukee. And I have a lot of faith that people in Milwaukee and in the rest of the district, if they are very well informed about the situation, would want it to be a fair situation. So I think it's part of the problem is that people don't really know what's going on in terms of where the money's going and where the expenses are. So, but as I say, I think that people would step up and want it to be a really equitable situation. But the awareness isn't there.
So we are over.
Just one quick,
Of course.
so I love the conversation, and so I just want to reiterate the request for more complete financials so we can know where the money's going and where it's coming from, et cetera.
With regard to Milwaukee, correct?
The entire district, actually, I mean, it's to all, what resources are being spent where. So part of it's Milwaukee, and then I think to distinguish Milwaukee Center, that in the past, I almost called it Senior Center, the Milwaukee Community Center, that is a community center, and there's going to be the, whatever it will be called, at Concord Community Center, and so those are regional assets, et cetera, different than individual parks when we start talking about walking distance to parks and so on and so forth. So I think it's important to know how the money is being distributed, but also at what rate it's going where. So just like all these conversations about how we would determine, well, if we were gonna, so the staff can come with recommendations, but if it comes as a surprise to us and to the board of directors, that they would have to get caught up to what y'all see, because you all see more numbers than we do, in my opinion. So I'd like to be able to see more numbers. Is that clear?
Yeah, I guess, so, we will absolutely do our best to prepare numbers to get to the point where, what I think I hear you, many people saying tonight is they want to understand where the resources are going in terms of resources to unincorporated versus Milwaukee. But I do want to say that we are very transparent about the resources that are allocated to different parts of our business. The budget document is very thorough. And so I want to make sure that I am clear that I believe in a very confident way that we have created a transparent budget document for the public to understand the allocation of revenues for projects and programs. We do not have the capability to tell you how much we spent on one park versus another in terms of operations and maintenance, unless it was a capital project. We'd have to actually go through, and I don't think we would be able to discern the staff time exactly spent on something unless it was a contracted project we could maybe figure out the amount spent on supplies. But the forensics that you're talking about would be very time intensive. So that's why I'm trying to really understand the question, because for me to have a staff person sit down and figure out how much we've spent on each park in the entire system in terms of operations and maintenance. And, it's getting down to how much time was spent mowing and how much fertilizer was put on that turf. And this is so I want to really, I really want to provide that information that you're requesting, but I want to make sure that we define a task so that it is really doable from a staff perspective. And I'm just trying to be very transparent that we don't meter staff time spent in its individual parts. So maybe you and I can work offline to really define what you're looking for. But for anybody who might be watching this video, I want to be clear that we follow our budget very closely, and that is really the best resource for the public to understand what our revenue intake is and how those resources are being spent to serve the community. So happy to talk with you offline. That's why I'm just struggling a little bit with the scale of the question that you're asking.
Thank you.
Checking, Ally, did you put your hand down?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Director's office, please.
Yeah, I think Kia's correct. And I don't disagree. Staff have been very transparent with sharing what they have and what they know. And I thought really your comment about the fertilizer, yeah, you can get that down into the detail, right? But I don't think anyone's suggesting we do. And in the time frame that we've got between now and let's just say the actual budget meeting, right? Probably not a lot of time to develop that sophisticated of a system, but in a way, there ought to be some level of tracking, right? That's more sophisticated than we currently have. That would be perhaps comparable to a business, like using the landscaping example. And so I don't know what can be done, but I will tell you this, is that don't count on the budget committee to do it. Don't count on the board of directors to do it. As far as getting this detail and talking about the finances, my history has been you all, thank you for your commitment to serving on the DAC, but you've got the opportunity to step into this. And now we've got some numbers and we're in the better place we've ever been. I mean, even though it's not pretty, but we're in a good position now to see it, understand it, and talk about it. So I encourage you to continue to do that and figure out a way that we can figure out how to mitigate that delta between what we're taking in and what's going out, that 800,000 to 1.5 million.
I'm gonna call on the last question.
I'll make it quick. Maybe as a suggestion, if Milwaukee Leagues, you don't know how efficient they're going to run their staff, so maybe you remove staff and just go to the basics of utilities, if that can be done. I'm just throwing out suggestions to kind of drive Gerber's question. If utility costs might be easy to see, then the heat map of property taxes, so money in, money coming out, very high level, very not accurate, but at least that gets the ball rolling. And to transition to make a turn, I am in favor of an increase in the tax rate. The question is, how much is that to sustain ourselves? Hopefully the systems plan will tell us that, but if anyone wants to hop on board my saying this every meeting, increase the tax rate wagon, we're talking about parks here. Mental health for everyone. I'll stop talking, but parks, whoever wants to help. Otherwise, those of us who live here, we're sitting on a rock that we have to address.
Yes, please go.
So I will say, to your point, that's important energy, whether Milwaukee stays or goes. The the kind of things he is talking about, the levies and bonds are gonna have to have a campaign and are gonna have to go to voters. And so we will need people on your bandwagon to start talking about that and start being willing to talk about that.
I'm in favor in perpetuity, not short term, every 10 years, get the voters to read something. Tax rate is where I stand.
You're our third and last question since I can't count. Jokes.
I
Thanks,
know,
Ally.
we
Go.
want to move on. Oh, so I just want to make one last comment. It's not a comment, it's actually a request. If we don't have, so what I'm hearing is we don't have the information about exactly like where money is going. And if that's the case, then I just request that we no longer make definitive statements like it's a fact that money is going somewhere when we actually don't know. I taught my 7th graders, thanks to Bill Nye, extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. And if we don't have extraordinary proof, we should no longer be making those claims. So until we get more information, and I agree with Musiri, like I'm curious just in the general sense, I'm not looking for the line items, but until we have that information, I don't think that we should continue, because I agree with you, Commissioner Savis, Director Savis, that misinformation is out there. And so we should not contribute to spreading the misinformation by making claims when we don't have the evidence to back it up.
Elected privilege.
Yeah, so I think we should bifurcate these two things. They're completely different. So I pretty well stand by what legal staff have been involved with in negotiations with, I won't say negotiations, but in negotiations, lawyer to lawyer between the city of Milwaukee and the county or the district. And that number was revealed in that number was north of $500,000 a year. That's a fact. Now, that's a fact from staff. So that's what I can tell you there. So that is the number. Where and what the detail is and how and where, I don't have that detail. I don't pretend to know that detail. And I think he has summed it up pretty well. It's the combination of the Milwaukee Center operations and cost and the parks. That's and the programming, all that combined. So Ally, we will, because that's a number out there, and that our legal team have used that and will continue to use that. I think we'll have to stand by that.
Well, then I think that maybe we need to clarify that, because the Milwaukee Center is different than Milwaukee Parks. And that's where our programming for the entire district is held. So maybe if that's the number that we're going to continue to use, then we include that that bit of information. Clarify for everyone who's listening that number that's what legally has been given, and that's the number that includes parks and the recreation services at the Milwaukee Center, because that is misleading.
Actually, it's couched as the district, not as individual components of what is owned by Milwaukee. The property, Milwaukee Center, is owned by the city of Milwaukee.
Okay, so, I'm gonna go next. And I'm gonna close this out. I think we could probably talk for another hour. Yeah. So to give a summary and the order I took notes, it's a net positive that we have the forecast that we do. It's been updated to reflect the SDC change regarding the community center at Concord. We can take from that in the big picture sense that our revenues are not where we need them to be to continue with current operations. So while there is a sense of urgency, we also as an advisory group have time to dig into how to respond to that, how to advise our board of directors, and how to sort of continue to hone in on our questions. So there was also a couple of requests for more information throughout this discussion. I would also say that what I heard is that operation and maintenance is proportional in a sub area to the number of parks that are in a sub area. That's pretty logical. I think that's a pretty safe thing to say. It's not a wild claim, so I don't need wild data. But also that all of the sub areas are in the district currently. And those other discussions are above and outside of the DAC right now. So I also would encourage us to try to keep our scope with what's here in front of us and what we can affect change on. But keep asking tough questions, because Kia loves it when we ask her tough questions. And I don't think I've made any more bad jokes for tonight, so I'll conclude there. Mark, if you're still here, our next topic was going to be the bylaws update. I will give it to y'all in 30 seconds or less. We have some great feedback on the bylaws revisions that are proposed. I will be setting up an electronic document with access for our subcommittee to work on that asynchronously between next Monday and November the 30th, so that we have plenty of time to notice any proposed changes before the December meeting. And that takes us to district monthly report, district member reports, excuse me. So I'll ask any DAC member who'd like to report. Ooh, I think you are first.
Okay, I have talked before about Milwaukee's 3 parks that were supposed to open in October. I think 2 of the 3 are on track to be completed in October. That would be Scott and Bowman Bray parks. I'm not sure that they'll actually open them because they're worried about the grass growing in. And I remember when Wichita was built, they kept it closed for a few months to give the grass a head start. But the two of them are nearing completion. The third one, the Valcourt Park, is probably a month behind. But those are parks being built with ARPA money, and they do need to get finished this year. I did want to also remind everybody that anybody who wants to come, we work in Midthorn Springs on second Saturdays of every month, and on Elk Rock Island on third Saturdays of every month. That's the Milwaukee Parks Foundation and various partners. 9:30 to noon, come out and help us pull ivy and other noxious weeds. And I did want to bring up here, I heard a concern from someone who sits on the Milwaukee Community Center, and especially bringing this up since Joel wasn't here tonight. The Milwaukee Community Center Advisory Board, and I know Mark sits on that as well, about a plan to reduce or eliminate the Connections magazine that that center puts out, and some concerns about how they've spent a lot of time the last year trying to increase the circulation, and so that felt there were some concerns about that, and I will just put that out there.
Thank you. Calling on Anita?
Yeah, I just want to say, not just for my sub area, but kudos to everybody who created the Fiesta Latina. And apparently Melina was really big in that in the first ones, and a woman named Maria is really key to making this last one happen. And I think they've all really been fabulous. And I really appreciate anything that's multicultural, having come from the Bay Area. A lot of that goes on. And also I got an email from Kay Everidge today. She's the person who created the seed library at Gladstone and Oak Lodge. And she says, come learn about the plant species that are home to the Oregon white oak and Yakima basalt habitats found in Gladstone and the surrounding areas. Many historic species are now rare in wild areas, but we can bring them back to our gardens and parks. Free native seeds will be available from the Seeds for Sharing library at both those libraries to take home for fall planting. And Melina has created this marvelous package. And this is what you can find in the 2 libraries. And maybe other libraries too, I'm not sure, but I know about those 2.
Point of information, is it Gladstone and what's the second location?
Oak Lodge.
Oak Lodge, thank you. That's great.
1 library, 2 branches.
Thank you. Right. So I don't see any additional hands raised. We can move to our next. Oh, sorry, Mark, please.
Yeah, real quick, I just wanted to say thank you to the staff and the Facebook posts they made about some of the work at the Concord School and opening up some of the windows that have been sealed for years and years and years. It was really exciting to see. So I just really appreciate the extra effort that the staff is making to make that building, bring it back to its former glory. So I just wanted to say thanks as much as I could possibly say.
Ally?
I also just want to kind of echo what Mark said. I drive by the Concord School every day on my way to work, and I have to say the progress that's been made, it's very exciting. I can kind of start to see where things are going to go, and like the earth has been flattened. So that's been kind of fun to see the progress. So I also want to just say, like, thanks to staff and thanks for everyone who contributed to that project. It has been really great to see on my way to work, be like, oh, I'm kind of a part of that, but not really. So I just want to say it's also been really fun to see that project continue.
Thank you so much. Handing it to Director Sally.
Thank you, Chair DeCastro. Okay, I will try to move quickly since we're a little short on time here. So on September 18th, the Board of Directors held their quarterly meeting here at the Aquatic Park. Thank you to Chair DeCastro for presenting a DAC report on your behalf. It was very well received. I'm very pleased to report that the board approved the system plan consultant contract with design workshop for phases 3 and 4, as well as the Wichita property sale to North Clackamas School District, which included a purchase and sale agreement and intergovernmental agreement. And among the most important details from my perspective is we, in addition to the sale price, we also, NCPRD received a $1 million credit for field and facility use and priority scheduling for both youth and adults for recreation programming, and the lowest rate, the Class A rate for youth programming. Those are big wins. That was a very complicated property sale, as many of you remember. It was a long process, and I just want to thank the board and all of you for all of the work that you put into that process, as well as all of the NCPRD staff that supported that process. So thank you. The board was also briefed on the 5-year financial forecast, the same one that you saw this evening. In your packets is a supplemental budget. So a supplemental budget is a modification to the current fiscal year budget that has already been adopted. There was a public hearing because the changes, the modifications were in excess of 10% of the total budget. Notice of this amendment was provided to all of you by email a week in advance of the public hearing, and a public hearing again was required because of that 10% increase over the budget. A briefing like this was not provided because it was really a timing issue. So documents and decision-making was not finalized as of this September DAC meeting. And NCPRD, I will also explain, is now coordinating with county finance in terms of the timeline for supplemental budgets. We used to bring them throughout different parts of the year, and county finance is now dictating that timeline so that there's more regularity for review and approval by the board. So there were really 2 key drivers for that supplemental budget. One was as we talked about tonight, the allocation of funds from 2 additional system development charge zones for the Concord property construction project. And also we moved funds that from last fiscal year to the current fiscal year for the construction expenses at the Concord property. So we just expected to expend more last year than this year, and we didn't because we had some schedule changes. So we simply had to move those funds forward. Testimony at the board meeting noted concerns about transparency, so I want to address those concerns. First of all, SDC allocations were based on policy approved by the board last year. in 2023. So those changes were following approved policy direction. Also, in advance of every board action, this committee is notified by email when the clerk of the board, the Clackamas County clerk to the board, posts the materials on the county's website. You received that email from Jessica Stead. A link to the materials for the supplemental budget was sent to this committee the week before the hearing. You know, it's always my goal to bring items to this committee in advance of any board action, if time and the agenda allows. In this case, both the county finance and the DAC timelines didn't make this possible, but I will always endeavor to try to do that. I'm also open to input, as I've shared with many of you about the additional information that we can provide in our budget document or at these meetings to make our work easier to understand and increasingly more transparent, or I should say ever more transparent. And I will begin that discussion about the budget process in particular when we kick that process off in November. So we're going to start all of these budget discussions in earnest very soon. Speaking of which, candidate interviews for open budget committee positions have been completed. Thank you to those of you in the room that are candidates. The board will consider recommendations for these open positions on October 22nd. And thank you sincerely to all the candidates that applied. We really appreciate it. We are now preparing for the kickoff of our annual budget process, as I mentioned, in November. We'll detail the budget calendar at that time, but I just want to share a few highlights for you this evening. So in November, staff will provide a budget 101 briefing to the DAC, particularly since there are some new DAC members, so that we kind of level the playing field in terms of knowledge. And we will also request appointment of a DAC Budget Committee liaison. This will be an ex officio member on the, well, actually, can I say it's an ex officio member? We're still working with legal, so let me get back to you about that, but at a minimum, the DAC Budget Committee liaison will participate in discussions with the Budget Committee. Forgive me, we're still working out the legal aspects of that relationship. In December, staff will provide a Q1 financial report and we'll discuss DAC budget priorities. So we're going to try to keep that discussion a high level about values and priorities, and staff will prepare budgets based on the direction provided by the DAC. In January, the Budget Committee will hold their first meeting. Typically, we do that in May, as Director Savas was saying, so we're well ahead of the process this year with our process improvements. And in February, the DAC will be briefed on the proposed budget. And we're also trying to work out how much of that proposed budget we can share because of some of the budget law requirements, as Director Savas was saying earlier this evening. So we'll work that out and we'll share what we can. More details to come. As Melina described, the website refresh is continuing with a launch expected the 1st of 2025. So thank you, Melina, and thank you to everyone that participated in the user test. We really appreciate it. As Ali was mentioning, construction continues for the Concord property projects, the park playground and renovated community center, as well as the new county library. Please, again, visit our project website and take a look at that construction cam. It's pretty cool. And we are still on track for a grand reopening next fall in 2025. Next week, the NCPRD board will approve the sale of the former Clackamas Elementary School property to Clackamas County to develop a recovery center to help adults struggling from substance use disorder. As per usual, you will receive a link to the board materials when they're published tomorrow. That's our expectation, is that they'll be published tomorrow. And the board materials will include all details of the real estate transaction, including the purchase price. So you can find all of the information there. Now for some thank yous. Thank you to NCPRD facilities and aquatic park staff for the deep cleaning and repairs to the aquatic park, during the month of September. And they also held 2 staff trainings. In your packet, there is a detailed list of all of the work completed. This is really tough grueling work, and I want to say it was beautifully done. Everybody did incredible work, both in terms of just deep cleaning, but also making really thoughtful repairs. We have a few more things to do, but it is a big undertaking every year, and I really sincerely appreciate all the staff that worked hard to do that. So thank you. Hooper's basketball registration opened on September 3rd with offerings for children in grades kindergarten through high school. Over 300 area youth have already enrolled, and when the season begins, we expect to have over 1,500 registered players. So I just want to remind all of you on the DAC that your work really touches all of these young people and the sports that they play. There's a lot going on, and the work of NCPRD and your work has a really broad reach. Fall classes began September 23rd. The fall programs, which included 37 adult and 11 youth offerings, have 834 participants registered, which is a 23% increase from the previous fall registration. Again, these stats are in your packet, but I think they're really noteworthy. And then one of my favorites, Milwaukee Community Center is going to host a Halloween bash and movie night on October 26th. Please check out our website for more information. And speaking of staff, she's not here tonight, so I can embarrass her. I am very pleased to announce that Callie Guntner has been promoted to the position of Administrative Services Supervisor through a competitive external recruitment process. Many of you already know Callie and her excellent work as NCPRD's financial analyst. Callie has deep knowledge and skill with our financial program and systems. And honestly, she is just an incredible team player and has an amazing work ethic. So she works really hard for all of us. She was not able to be here tonight, but I'm going to ask her to share more about her skills and experience when she's back with us in November. So just want to give her a shout out and embarrass her. And hopefully if you see her in November, you can give her a pat on the back for this promotion. It's well deserved. That's it for me.
Thank you. So we're at 7 o'clock, but I would like to sneak in a question. I saw that there was a stairwell repair proposed. Is the stairwell in the aquatic center closed off for use, or is it open for use right now?
Closed.
It's closed. Okay.
It's closed. So correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that we have closed the access to one of the slides.
One direction, so there's still access up the other stairwell. But we found a safety concern that we need to have mitigated before we can open that other side.
That sounds like a win-win.
So it'll be a while
Folks have access to the
before we do
slide.
that, but there's still
That's right.
access.
Slide solved, but we hired an engineering firm, they're looking at the fix for it, and then waiting for some contracting to get done, and then we'll jump on it and get it fixed, and then be back up.
Thank you. Anita?
Yeah, tiny detail. I mentioned the seeds, but I forgot to mention that there's a class Saturday, October 12th, 2 to 3 p.m. at the new Gladstone Public Library, if you want to actually learn in person from an expert named Cindy Hines.
Thank you. So normally we would go to public comment, and thank you for your report. But I don't see any folks in the room currently. Are there any folks on Zoom who are not in the DAC? Okay. So that means we will close public comment, and that takes us to our future dates. So if you have agenda submissions, please let us know by October 16th. And the next meeting for our DAC is on November 13th. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.